Hello, family members. Welcome to my front porch. Hope you're having a nice day today. Um, I want to talk today about a topic I think doesn't get nearly enough discussion, and I want to frame that through a couple of different recent incidents um, that people have been talking about, and it is corporate bigotry and how corporations use bigotry against minorities and the public at large. Because that's definitely happening and it's driving me crazy, and we need to talk about it. The most recent of the two issues that I'd like to discuss is the corporate um, malfeasance from Target in trying to force an end to the Target boycott that's been ongoing for over a year now. I don't know if you picked up on this, but Target went out to black people who were not the originators or the organizers of the boycott and negotiated with, I guess, just some random black people to end the boycott, and then put out this whole big announcement about how the boycott is over now. I cannot even get over how racist this is. It just blows my mind. It's like they thought, oh, well, black people started this boycott, and we don't want to do the things that they want us to do to end the boycott, but we do want to end the boycott because it's costing us money. So we'll just go get three random unconnected black people and think that that's going to be good enough for people. I mean, maybe some people who aren't paying any attention might be fooled by that, but the black people who started the boycott certainly aren't going to be fooled by that. And the people who listen to the people who started the boycott who aren't black, like myself, we still listen to them. So when you try to go out and say that the boycott is over, we still are listening to the boycott organizers who are like, yeah, no, it's not. So anyone who is like locked in enough to care to boycott, this is not going to work for. The only people this is going to work for is like those people who are like, I don't get into politics, that are that privileged enough to think that you can just check out of politics. Like, there's anything in life that's not political, that's just a weird stance to take. I'm just saying. But like, it's not going to work on anyone who was actually really committed to the boycott. It might work in people who are were just sort of like shallowly like, oh yeah, I think there's some reason why I wasn't shopping at Target. And, it's not that convenient, but I'll deal with it for now. And maybe they think there's like a few people they'll get that way. But is it worth doubling down on your commitment to racism? I guess they thought it was. And this is the point where we have to kind of stop and go, hey, yeah, corporations may not be people, but they certainly can be racist and take racist actions. And actually, their racist actions can be very influential. So maybe we do need to talk about that. I think in a lot of ways, the idea of having DEI initiatives in corporations was a way to act like they were trying to do something about their institutional racism. But the problem is, they don't really want to fix it because the people at the top of the corporations are still generally cis white men. What are they going to do? Demote themselves? I don't think so. And they think that's how DI works, is that you get extra points for being black or a woman or disabled or a person of color or whatever, instead of it's just trying to take away the negative effect of not being a white man. White men are just so overly privileged that if you don't actively do something to take care of it, it's going to just continue. I mean, these systems are in place to support themselves. They're self-sustaining. You have to actively disrupt them. And so, you know, a nice little DEI initiative that doesn't really change much of your actual above middle management, you know, leadership structure, it's pretty useless, you know? Uh, it's like when you see a movie about racism or some sort of like famous black person and it's written and directed by white people. And it's kind of like, why? When you see a woman's story being told by a male director, male screenwriter, why? You know, why do you think that someone who's not from that group is the appropriate person to tell that group's story? Because that's what happens when you get stories about plus size people, you know, like say The Whale. You don't get very many films about people who are plus size. And yet when we do, it's played by a straight size guy. It was probably almost all of the creative team, straight size people, you know. And yet that's going to be the representation of what people like me are like, but it's made without me. So how much of representation is that really, you know? It's a step, but it's like a half measure at the very most. And that's what corporations usually do when they're held to the fire over their bigotry, is they take little corporate half measures. And then the actual result of that is nothing changes. But by the time that that's obvious that nothing changed, people have moved on. We've got to stop with the moving on part. You know, we've got to hold their feet to the fire and continue holding their feet to the fire. And that's not easy. You know, we're in a attention economy. There's always someone competing for our attention. And you have to go out of your way to actually follow through and follow up on these stories a lot of the times. It's not always like with this Target boycott where it was like so blaringly obvious that I'm pretty sure every major black creator that I've followed has talked about that in the last few days. And a good proportion of the white creators that I follow as well. It actually blew up because it was so obvious and it was so wrong. I want to talk about an example that's not nearly as recent. It's still recent. But the corporate bigotry that caused the situation is kind of glossed over, and that's why I want to revisit it. And it is the BAFTA Awards, the 2006 BAFTA Awards, where the BBC, I believe, went out of its way to set up John Davidson to do something reprehensible, or that would seem reprehensible to the outside ableist public, so that they could exploit it for, you know, attention. Because again, attention economy. Everyone was talking about the BAFTAs after this happened, right? And what did the headline say? The headline said, "White man calls black actors the N-word at the BAFTA Awards." And it might have included that the white man had Tourette's. And I just saw an explosion of terrible, horrible, horrible takes on this from multiple sides of the issue. You know, I saw people who were absolutely racist as heck and were, you know, completely downplaying the horrible impact that the moment had because of the fact that John Davidson has Tourette's. And I had people who were like, he shouldn't have been in the room because of the horrible impact that the moment had. And I'm like, y'all are blaming the wrong people. It wasn't the people who called out the impact that were wrong. it wasn't John Davison that was wrong. It was the fucking BBC, okay? The BBC sat that man 40 rows back and promised him that none of his outbursts would make it to air. And yet they deliberately put a microphone right in front of him, and they aired that. And they edited out plenty of other things. They edited out Free Palestine, they edited out other outbursts that he made, but they left that in. They made a deliberate choice to leave the N-word in their broadcast and harm however many people of the African diaspora globally, because that N-word is mostly harmful here in the United States, but it is harmful to other people from the African diaspora. And that's just not the way that the story was reported at all. It wasn't the BBC deliberately set up black people to have to hear the N-word with no context on their broadcast. And then they can, oh, his disability is our excuse. No, it's not. You promised that man that none of his outbursts would make it to air, and yet you aired the worst one. His name is always going to be associated with this. The people who have coprolalia like he does already have such an uphill battle to get respect, to be accepted into public spaces. I cannot tell you how many people I saw in comment section saying he shouldn't have been there. The fuck he shouldn't have. He should have been there. There was a movie about his life. This was his moment, and he deserved to be there. And I just don't understand why, after it happened, and there was some visible, reaction on the stage, they didn't stop it right there, say, oh my gosh, we're sorry, guys, and just film it again. It's movie stars. You don't think they could do a second take? After being checked to make sure that they're okay? Because here's the thing that I didn't know until like a day or two after the whole incident, when John Davidson actually came out and explained, he didn't have any idea that people on the stage could even hear him until they saw them react. They shouldn't have been able to hear him. He was 40 rows back. If there wasn't a microphone right in front of him, if he hadn't been set up, none of this would have happened. And I don't see anybody giving the BBC the amount of smoke that they deserve for this. It is infuriating to me that they hurt the black diaspora at the same time as setting back the Tourette's community in a moment that was all about celebrating a picture where John Davidson was trying to help make the Tourette's community better, advocate for them. And they set him up in the cheapest, meanest, horrible way they possibly could. It makes me not want to watch anything related to the BBC ever again. The BBC has made some very bad choices in the last few years. They are pretty openly transphobic in a lot of ways. There's a lot of homophobia, misogyny, but there's a lot of good stuff that they put out too. I mean, I love their nature documentaries. I watch a lot of BBC nature. What point do you go, this can't just be okay? This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. It was. they didn't know exactly what that was going to happen. They didn't know exactly what community they were going to hurt, but they knew that they were going to hurt somebody, that they were going to find some moment that they could use to go viral and get all the attention that they wanted. And they sure got that attention. And either black people or disabled people are the ones who pay the price. Or both. Definitely both. I mean, I bet it's super, super fun for black people with Tourette's, especially with coprolalia. I've actually watched some videos from black people with coprolalia, and their extreme disappointment with how this played out, it breaks my heart. It really does. Like they didn't have it hard enough already, you know? And I went back and I looked on several different comment sections, even now, and people didn't follow up. They didn't see all of the mitigating stuff. They didn't listen to the black people with coprolalia that are like, yes, this is really how this is. This does not mean that he is racist. That doesn't mean anything at all. You know, there was a lot of debate on whether or not John Davidson should have apologized, and I honestly think that it might have been nice if he did. I have a hearing loss. When I can't hear someone and they get frustrated, even though that's not my fault, the impact of that, what my disability caused, that frustration, is real. And so I do apologize for it. And I don't think it would have hurt if he had apologized for it. But I also don't think that he was the one at fault. He's just been a cog in a corporate game that was being played over his head, and he trusted them enough to believe that they would treat him with respect when they invited him to a ceremony that was going to honor an aspect of his life, and he was wrong. And every single minority person, every single woman, black person, other person of color, gay, trans, anybody else that was at that ceremony that could have words shouted at them that could be that hurtful, those were the people that they were willing to sacrifice. It just happened to be Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, but it could have been anybody, except for the cis white men, right? Because there's just not any word that you can say to a cis white man that is nearly that hurtful. There's not even really a word like that for almost any other group I can think of. The N-word just has such deep, hurtful connotation to it. There's literally nothing else that he could have said that could have caused a bigger stir. And it's not at all a coincidence that that's the one they chose not to edit out. That's how I know it was a setup. That's how you can see it was a setup. He said other things to women and gay people, and those words could have been very hurtful if they dared, but they weren't. But the one word that is the most painful word that can be said to any minority group, basically, that's the one that gets said. And that's the one that gets aired. I am going to try to track down some of the black Tourette's creators I watched. Especially there were two, a young lady and a sort of middle-aged man. I think I'm really bad at guessing ages. I'm sorry. That I watched first when this first happened, that were the most informative. I'll try to find those links and put them in the description here. But I definitely encourage you to watch people with coprolalia talk about this. If you have any doubt at all about why it's not at all an indication of any sort of racism on John Davidson's part, If that's a lingering thought in your head, and I think it is because I've seen a lot of comment sections who are like, well, it was in his head and he said it. But the thing is, you can't grow up in this culture and not have heard that word. I can't even remember ever using it in my lifetime. But if I had coprolalia, it could be one of my tics just as easily as any other word. Because coprolalia causes a misfire in the brain that causes you to say the most upsetting thing that you can say. Like, that's part of it. And it's like physically painful for people if they try to suppress their tics. So, I've learned a lot about Tourette's and coprolalia after this, which I think it would have been nice if there had been more of that. The BBC should have been talking about that constantly, as far as I'm concerned. Oh my gosh, my cat's getting in a fight with the neighbor's cat. I just heard him. I don't know if you can hear that on the microphone or not, but why, Socks? Why? He's such a jerk. You gotta love cats, though. Oh, Valley! Oh, my other kitty is here now, though. Well, family members, I think it's time for me to wrap up here. I've said what I needed to say, but we have to hold these corporations' feet to the fire. When they do these things that are openly bigoted, we have to call them out. And there has to be people who get fired. I'm sorry, there just has to be. The only way that we keep BBC and other places from doing things and setting people up the way they did is firing them. The only way that we keep corporations like Target try to trick people into thinking the boycott's over when it's not is if people get fired. But I think it's a little too late for us to put Target under any sort of like extra. I'm already boycotting them. I can't boycott them more, But the BBC, I don't know. I'm going to have to see what I have to do with that. I mean, not being British, I usually watch BBC through YouTube, so I don't know how impactful me boycotting them would be, but maybe I need to do that. I don't know. I'm going to have to do some more research, but I wish people were more intellectually curious, but then again, we're so tired. I have way too much time on my hands, being disabled. I'm bored and I have way too much time on my hands, and that's how I'm able to keep informed about things. If you don't have that time, I would suggest subscribing to me or people like me who do have more time on their hands and are able to wade through all of the goings on and try to give you information that you might not get otherwise. Okay, family members, I'm going to let you go. But in lieu of cats, because they're all running around, I'll give you a little sunset. This is what I was looking at while you were looking at me. All right, love you, family members. Bye.